Good afternoon, everyone in the room and also online. Welcome to this workshop session. My name is Wim van Mestene. I'm from Amsterdam. My lab, which is a high-pressure, high-temperature lab, is currently one of the facilities in Europlanet 2024 RI. And if or when Space Science RI gets funded, I hope to co-lead the TA program, sort of stepping in the shoes of Gareth in a way. So then I will turn into Lord Voldemort, but I won't do that this afternoon. So this session is one in a series of sessions. I think in total there are 6 spread over today and tomorrow, talking about essentially the future or the sustainability of Europlanet RI and its sister RIs. This morning we had a first overview and sort of a background to these sessions, but not everyone in the room or online may have been there this morning. So I'll give a very brief overview of this morning, and anyone in the audience that was there can chip in if I forget anything important, please. So we talked a little bit about the background, let's say the history of Europlanet and other space-related research infrastructures, culminating in the submission of the Space Science RI proposal a few months ago. We heard from Nigel about that, and we also heard that the result of that will be known sometime next month, hopefully. If that gets funded, of course, everyone will be very happy. But I think, in a nutshell, what we're going to discuss today and also tomorrow is, let's assume it does not get funded. And then the question is, where do we go from here? And that question has several aspects. So the one aspect is, what do we want as a Europlanet society and research infrastructure? Do we want to carry on without EU funding, coming up with our own scheme of funding or co-funding, continued access to our laboratories, field sites, and virtual access program? And the other aspect to that question is, well, the last visits, if we don't get additional funding via Space Science RI, is May 2024. How are we going to prepare for another try via the EU or another funding source? And what do we need to do to prepare for a next proposal? And an important part of that option, that possibility, is that the EU will very likely request co-funding in applications for RI-type groups in the future. And this morning we had a brainstorm, which was plenary, so we didn't divide into groups. We had a discussion in the whole room about aspects of this. So we talked, for example, about the possibility of introducing a membership fee to a future Europlanet RI that would give you access to services and or laboratories and or field sites. And we talked about how that could be feasible for some, especially larger institutes that maybe could cough up a membership fee from centralized funds, but that this may be very difficult or simply impossible for smaller laboratories or single laboratories in a larger institute where you compete with other laboratories that are not part of planetary science. We talked about parts of our current research infrastructure that could well continue to get by without needing a huge amount of funding. So we discussed the telescope network, for example, where the situation seems to be quite different and financially, let's say, less stressful a little bit than for some of the laboratories. And what else did we talk about? Sorry, get my notes. Oh, yeah, and then I lost it. Yeah, well, essentially in the current financial circumstances, that for many facilities it would be difficult or impossible to bring up a membership fee. We discussed ideas of asking users to pay maybe part of the costs of a visit, and we also talked about very different funding possibilities, for example, through crowdfunding. So yeah, we had an initial brainstorm, and this session today, from now until the coffee break at 3:30, we have a chance to continue our discussions. One aspect of the current RI that we did not discuss this morning was the future of the VA program. So that's certainly something that we should bring up if there are enough people to discuss that, because we didn't touch upon that this morning. And as Nigel said this morning, we really are looking for ideas, thinking out of the box. So what are we missing? Are there options to continue funding Europlanet, even if Space Science RI is not funded this time round? It's a brainstorm session, so I'm just here introducing, of course, the session, but it's really up to all of you in the room and online to start the discussion. There's also the option to divide up into smaller groups. And my first question is, would you prefer to have smaller discussions, for example, a group online and 2 or 3 groups in the room for a little while, or would you prefer to continue in a plenary way for now? What do people feel? Yeah, so here in the room, most people think plenary is fine. Are there online people who think that that will not work for them? No? No? Okay, well then we'll keep it plenary, and if we think the discussion stalls, then we can also always divide up afterwards, I would say. Okay, so another way to structure the discussion is either we go per group of facilities, so we could discuss field sites first, and then VA, and then the labs, for example. We could also divide the discussion up into types of funding. So you could think about possibilities for local funding. This would be at your institution's level. It could be national funding level, like science foundations or space agencies in our case. Would that be useful or not? And then we can talk about European level, EU, ESA, whatever we think is viable. I'm not really sure what would be best. I think most people have most affinities with the facilities that they're part of or that they're leading. So that may be an easier way to structure the discussion, but it's up to all of us. Gareth? Yeah.
I want to ask one question of the audience here in the room for us. Are any people here involved in the VA aspects of, I mean, Bernard uses it. Is there anybody else who's doing much with VAs? And online, I saw Angelo. Can you unmute Angelo Rossi, please?
Hi, everyone. Good to see you remotely. I closed the video to save some bandwidth, and essentially, yes, we had some discussion, and it was a discussion that was not totally across VA, but what I can say is that from the VO side, there is a strong, there are of course some different projects that are, supporting or, satellites running, for example, within EOSC, and there is a very strong institutional support, for example, of the Observatory of Paris and other institutions. So regardless the other VAs, I cannot speak for Spider at the moment, but we had some discussion within GMAP. And essentially, we have approached last year geological survey, because maybe it's something that it will be clear tomorrow when we introduce the GMAP VA. But essentially, geologic mapping is something that historically, as many of you already in the room or online knows, is something that is with geologic surveys. And in Europe, that's for the planetary case, that's kind of anomalous, because of course we don't have historically a planetary geologic mapping program, nor planetary geology as developed as it was in the 60s and later US. But that's some discussion that has been started, Gareth. It was not really much close to implementation, and is still ongoing, this discussion. But on the other hand, there are several institutions that are engaged with mapping. There are several other Horizon programs or proposals that have been launched. Clearly, that's a kind of, as Nigel was suggesting, I think at the beginning of this workshop or this meeting overall, that's something that can help, of course, but it's not infrastructure. So I don't know if this helps.
You're going to have to do multiple approaches. So everything helps is the take-home message.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have to differentiate, and clearly we cannot put all the eggs in the basket. I mean, hopefully the big basket works, but if it doesn't, as Vin was highlighting, it's probably not only a kind of a risk management measure, but it's also a necessity, because there is no basket which is so big to fit the eggs we want, so to say.
I'm going to ask you, and maybe Bernard as well, if there've been any discussions. Clearly, if Space RI is funded, then fine, but in the next proposals thereafter would have to be co-funded. Have you had any thoughts in terms of what order of magnitude funding you think would be required for the VAs, both GMAP and maybe Vespa? Can you give us back of the envelope guess?
I think that something on around the ballpark of the current infrastructure and the new proposal, which is not so dissimilar, will be something reasonable. So we are talking about something around across 4 years, with, of course, in kind support of the order of magnitude of 1 million, something less, something more. Clearly, the more the better. But realistically, we are flying along across several 100,000 to 1 million per work package, so to say, per VA, and that's something that probably in part will have to be also seeked at national agency level.
I think we probably can't do much more on the VAs if I'm not. It's not as if Angelo knows what's going on, but we need more people who are involved in the VAs to do this brainstorming. So I hope tomorrow, when we have more people from the other RIs, where they also have other VAs, that we can maybe have a bit more focus on the VAs there. Hopefully Angelo can help lead some of that discussion, not just from the GMAP point of view, but more from Vespa, etc. So we burn up for this and help with that. Okay, so just to be aware, Vim and I said, right, VA is where we should start this afternoon. This is an area we didn't cover this morning, so we're now going to reassess how we're going to organise this afternoon.
Yeah, sure. So as the rest of you are not part of the VA program, or partially, I guess. So one conclusion I get from Angelo's input was that it seems to me, but maybe that's across all parts of Europlanet, is that if Space RI does not get funded, it's not as if the whole community would fall apart immediately, because there are parts of it that could be funded. Well, I'm not going to say straightforwardly, but there seem to be options to keep parts of it going. But of course, that won't be the case for all beneficiaries at all, or all facilities. But I personally don't have a good feeling of the extent to which the current infrastructure could keep going with an access program. Is there anyone in the room that has a better feeling for this? I mean, are we talking about 10% can keep going, or is it 80? John?
I think there's a big difference between the field sites and the lab facilities. So, for example, my field site, our field site activity, it will die instantly. So there will be no more Greenland if we don't get it, the Space RI next year. The lab will continue undoubtedly at least for a couple of years. But even on that relatively short time scale, at least my facility is not secured. I would say in 2 or 3 years, it's uncertain whether my facility still exists. I mean, this isn't just, failing to get funding next year, it's a accumulation of other factors. Cutbacks from my university, changing methodologies in the way they run facilities or labs. They more and more demand that my lab pays more and more of direct costs, as well as paying overhead, as well as so there's like zero tolerance for any projects which don't bring in enough money. And I don't think my lab is special in that way. So yeah, it would be wonderful to find a plan B, but yeah, I'm kind of pessimistic at this point. For the lab facilities, maybe not on the short term, but yeah, on the scale of 2 or 3 years, things might look very different.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know it's going to be unpopular, but I think the Space Sci RI should be Plan B. Plan A should be a really serious business plan for the society. We have the figures. We know how much we need to make John's boss happy. You know how much it costs to come in the field with me. So we all have these numbers. Susmita and Sophia have the spreadsheet. So we just need to put together a business plan and circulate it before the outcome of the proposal is out. The simple reason is that I have the feeling that if we don't get that money, a lot of people will leave. But if we approach them like in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks time and say, listen, we got, no, Susmita says no, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. Okay, whatever. Susmita, you tell us the timing. My point is that let's approach everyone and say, okay, we have a business plan. You're part of this business plan. And we're going to make sure that whomever approaches us to go to John's or to Fulvio is paid X and Y. And then if we get the space science and research infrastructure, that's on top of it, because anyway, even if we get that 5 years money, it's not forever, So the business plans still need to be there, and then you can adjust it every 4 years for inflation, for people leaving, people moving in. If I have a business plan, then I can go to my institution that is really doesn't care much and say, okay, guys, I mean, we are part of a big infrastructure now. There is benefit for the partners. Instead of paying 100, you pay 80. And those that are not member of the society, they pay 120 instead of 100. So we make sure that, the members have benefits and they see immediately what's the benefit of being a Europlanet Society member is because I can go to Garrett's lab, everything is sorted, and I pay 20% less than the normal fee. If I'm from the States and I'm not a member, I want to still go to Garrett. We still take care of our logistic, but you pay 20% more. So next year you subscribe. With this business plan, people will think that we are on top of everything. And we don't really care about the research infrastructure. That's small money, I think that is what the message we should try to send.
That's a clear idea. You want to respond?
I do, yes. I agree and I disagree. I agree that we should have plan A, that we have a sustainable plan for the research infrastructure, and we come up with a business plan. I think coming up with a business plan in the next 2 or 3 weeks is laughable. Anybody, if you put that to John's boss, he will look at that and laugh. That will be ridiculous. Yeah, exactly. And we will do ourselves more damage by coming up with something that's not credible. So we need to spend time and do this properly. There is absolutely no point just bullshitting at this point. We have an opportunity, and we have an opportunity because this is the last research infrastructure. We have money within this to do the sustainability planning. This is why we've got this meeting, and this is why we've got the time over the next 14 months to do this properly. We cannot come up with a document in a couple of weeks that is remotely credible, and we should not do that because there is no point. However, I do still completely think that we've got to stop thinking about Space RI as a continuation of Europlanet. It is not a continuation of Europlanet. We are a little fish in a big pond there. What we want, you know, we've been leading that proposal. I think that gives us a distorted view of how that is. You know, we put in a lot of the effort. Nigel was kind of there. I think there was sort of a general sense that this is continuation. It is not continuation. If we want Europlanet to continue in some way, shape, or form, we have to come up with a plan for it. We need to do that now because we're never going to get an opportunity. If we bank on Space IRI, there isn't going to be this opportunity at the end of that project because we're going to be fighting over the scraps with 5 other communities. So plan A has to be coming up with a business plan, but we've got to do it properly. We can't just pull something out of the bag because that's not going to help anybody.
So I think the reasonable view, you talked about a short time frame, where you think that maybe people will run away if Space IRI is not funded. Won't those people come back when there is a solid business plan, or you think that will be it for people?
Well, you know how difficult it is to get people into society. The moment they step out, you won't get them back. So that's why I'm saying, no, I actually, now that Anita made that comment, I actually understand it's good. We still have time in Europlanet, but, you know, it's what I'm scared of is the perception, you know. I mean, the people that work at that proposal know very well what Anita said, but the people that didn't, and they're maybe part of it just, you know, as a collaborator, they might get afraid that nothing is really happening. So it's true, we still have time before this research infrastructure is over. I mean, it's just a matter of communication, with this time in internal communication, not to the outside community, to our own community, and say, let's stick together because, you know, even if we don't get this money, which by the way is not plan A for Europlanet, we still have a plan. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I totally agree with what was said. Plan A is we do not have the EC money, and we take the time to make a very good planning of things. Don't forget that in the same time frame, we now have this ASBL, so we can start looking for other sources of funding, and we should already search for funding. Not the space error. There might be a solution there too. So it has to be done in parallel.
Yeah, I also would like to be slightly more optimistic, which is unlike me, but I mean, yeah, if you look at it the other way, we're not starting from scratch, at least. Many of our facilities now have kind of like a user base, or at least a long list of people who've come to our lab and know about it through Europlanet. So I think there's a huge amount of awareness now about what's possible within Europe, within the facilities, and I would expect that most of the people who visited a facility and it's all gone very well and something has come out of it, they won't forget that. They will want it to continue in some way. So I think the motivation is there. And another good thing about it is a lot of these people are young. A lot of the people who've been involved are young postdocs, PhD students. I'm sure they won't forget the way that Europlanet has functioned, and will want to help build something up that works in the future. So yeah, even if we can't find a solution, I'm sure within some years some solution will be found, which will give this capability of having access to facilities. I think so.
Thank you. The other comments about this? Online, are there any suggestions? No? Gareth?
I would encourage Jörn, if you're there, to tell us some of the thinkings coming out of DLR, because I know they are undergoing similar changes and demands to bring in more funding and look for co-funding within Germany in part of the different states. And it would be nice to hear what has been imposed and how DLR is starting to think about approaching these things, because we're going to have related questions I'm sure are going to come up there. So Jörn, I don't know if I hope you're still there, or if not, Alessandro.
Yeah, I'm here, and now I can also unmute.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes and no. So there is a similar, I think this is a push all over Europe, actually all over the world, to have all facilities and everything make money. So this is just a very generic, we ideally should make money. And that's basically where the thinking ends. So even where the money should come from and what it means to make money is completely, totally unknown. And I think that's part of the problem we are having, and I think that's part of the discussion we need to have, is what does it actually mean we need to make money? We need to yes, we also need to co-fund our facility, but again, what does it actually mean to co-fund our facility? Even that is very, very unclear. And so we are in Germany, and we have a much smaller regional infrastructure that is also now moving basically in a similar way from being federally funded before, very similar, in our case Helmholtz, not the European Union, but similar construct to something that now does not get this funding anymore. And we are basically currently trying to go through the same discussions of bartering agreements and paying membership fees and exchanging things. And that is part of where the discussion then came up from, is if we pay membership fees and we get our membership fee out in the end again, that's nice, but it's in the end a zero-sum game. So it's not something you're actually making money from. And that's where we need to be very careful in what it means. For some institutions, that is enough. It's we pay in X amount of euros into this, and we get X amount of euros out again in the end, and that goes into running our lab. So we have money coming from outside that runs the lab, and in the end, it's just one pocket to the other pocket. If that is fine, I can live with that. Everyone can live with that. If they actually really expect us to generate money, so we put X in, but we want to have X plus Y out, and Y should be a gigantic number, that's a completely different story. And that does not work with membership fees, does not work with bartering agreement. That only works if there is a real proper source of funding coming from outside. And I think part of the discussion that we are having or starting to have right now with the space yes or no is basically, do we need to have this Y? Do we actually need to have extra money, or is it fine if we are in a consortium, we pay in a certain amount of money and run the labs together and basically just get our money back, and that goes into running the labs. So I think that is from the discussions we had in Germany right now, and in our regional group, and also with a lot of a more industry-focused approach that we have for DLR, is that this is, I think, is really the core question: is do we need to make real money, or do we just need to make virtual money that runs the facilities and makes everyone happy, including John's boss?
So I think at the moment, the idea is that we would need to bring in real money, real cash.
Sort of. I mean, I think we are talking about not for profit. We are talking about, we're not talking about generating a money-making activity, but we are talking about something that covers the cost of activities, and it can't just be the lab costs, because administering a TA program, managing a TA program, organizing it, having the vision for it, all takes funding in itself. People are not going to run this on a voluntary basis, and if it's going to be properly sustainable, there needs to be an infrastructure around it. Now we have the legal entity at ASBL that has the capacity to do it. It doesn't necessarily need to be a massive organization. And, you know, a lot of it is periodic, like running the calls and administering the calls. And we know how to do that via the ESF. We don't have to do it ourselves. But, you know, we need to make sure that whatever it is that we do realistically covers the costs involved and allows us to have the people to manage it who are the right people to do it, who have the knowledge and the skills to do it. So I don't know whether that answers your question, Jörn.
I mean, it's not my question. It's a question that should guide the discussion. So, I mean, and it's a question I have been asking people then when they tell me we need to make money is what kind of money you want me to make, real money or money that makes you happy because it's virtual money and you can say, yes, we have. So this is a discussion we need to have honestly among us. And then, I mean, how we sell that and how we discuss it to the outside is a different story, but we need to have that honest discussion internally. And that's why I'm raising it, because that's the answers to that are surprising depending on who you talk to.
I think if there is a virtual money solution whereby things don't necessarily actually get paid out, it's kind of there as a in-kind contribution. I mean, I think there still will be real costs that will have to be paid. So maybe it's a bit of a mixture of both.
So should we talk about a bit more about maybe the business plan? What we're missing to make that? Because we agree we need time to do that. Is there anything we should do or that we don't know yet about this plan?
I don't think we know anything about this plan yet. I mean, I think we know that we have to do it, and we're starting this week, and we know that we have to have it done in a year and a bit. So, I mean, I think the first thing really is for people to, throughout this week, and then afterwards, we need proper thoughts from people about what might be feasible and what might be not feasible. I mean, Gareth, I don't know whether we could just put together a slightly more fleshed out straw proposal based on what we were talking about last night, or that then people can talk to. But I think we're going to need to go and talk to some of the key facilities as well, and get their feedback and thoughts on how things might work from their perspective. Go.
I don't know whether this is the right time to mention this, but my institute my facility has a kind of system. Basically we have two daily rates that we charge. One is essentially for research projects. So for example, what could in the future be a Europlanet access that does not pay my time. It pays technician time and some maintenance for the lab, and then some overhead. Let's say 25% overhead. It's hard to imagine anything being less than that, and that is, as you've heard, probably of the order of €1,000 a day. I'm sure this is similar for lots of other facilities. Bless you. And then we have an industrial rate, which is about twice that. And so in principle, you know, some of the industrial contracts we get can pay for some research contracts, sort of in some very generic way that you didn't hear it from me. If don't quote me on this, but I mean, that could be some kind of thing, idea.
Yeah. I think that to do the business plan, what we should start from is the statistics that we have. So we have been, Europlanet has been running those facilities for years now. So we should have a good statistics of which facilities how they work, how many times they hosted visit, what was the average price of this visit. Maybe then go to the people, because of course those price might be research kind of price, and we might have also two kind of price, because we could say that Europlanet members have this alleviated costs, and non-members pay a bit more. But I think we should have a lot of information that you gathered, and then contact all the individual labs so that they can give an amount of what they would request per visit. That should not be, that should certainly be the first step. Then we understand how much we are talking about.
Yeah, I think that's the easy part, because we already have several budget. The difficult part is to understand how much is the infrastructure going to cost, because the money that you generate is not just for John to run his costs. So you need people that run the society, because I think that is the whole point. If the society doesn't generate money through other calls and donors, this business plan is the only way. So that is probably the number that, or at least I don't know it. So how many people have to be paid? What kind of infrastructure you're gonna keep, and how are you going to convince John Boss to get 5% of that 1,000 to go into Europlanet administration? So I think that is the tough job to do.
And I think the other thing as well is, as you were talking about, if there is a market for commercial people that will pay to do it, what kind of market is that? How do we scope that out? Is your boss again going to be happy that some of those come through Europlanet rather than directly through your lab, which is probably not. So, how can we do this in a way that actually adds value to the community without perhaps labs seeing us as a competitor or more of a loss-making thing than a benefit.
Susmita, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, Anita, right at the start of the project, I mentioned there was a company I'd come across in the UK called Cluster Market. And what they do, they provide a platform to be able to sell time on universities, pieces of large kit, for example, to other people. And that would be something we could look at for scoping exercise. I don't know if there are any other equivalents in any other countries, but that's something I came across while I was at UEL, and that Kent uses them as well. So we could have a look at them.
Yeah, absolutely. And any ideas? We've talked about quite a few sort of very, very different things, from that to the Austrian Space Forum to the Planetary Society. There must be other things as well that are in some way relevant, and certainly telescope networks as well. I mean, we DFET were involved in Las Cumbres global network, and people pay a lot for time on telescopes. Now, for us, that's complicated because we're already part of that, and so we have arrangements for selling time. But understanding how models work and what people are willing to pay for, and how they're constructed, must be the first step, as well as gathering, as you say, the stats on who does what, and also the impact. Building that really, really compelling case about what Europlanet through RI, through EC funding's managed to deliver, and what we would lose if all of that went, if we didn't have any way of maintaining that at any level. Would you like to say something about? Yes. So our resident economist in the room.
I am a little bit confused at which business plan because there should be a micro level strategy actually, because it's not easy to commercialization on this scientific area, in my opinion. Then should be new vision in order to make a money, in this sector, because I'm a little bit far from this scientific area. Then I need the more complicated situation, especially how can we prepare some budget, how can we prepare some strategic way. It's very important because nobody interested in the this area, because as I mentioned before, most of people doesn't know what this process is doing. Then it should be more clear, and it should be take some strategic plan, which component, which sector, and others. It is very important. After that, most of the young people, especially young generation, need to learn more things about this process, in my opinion.
John, yeah.
I had a thought which may or may not be relevant. You mentioned crowdfunding, and I was thinking that some of our previously we have run what I call experimental campaigns at my lab. It's where several institutes are involved in a single experiment. That might be a sort of model for that. Several members of Europlanet contribute some money and become members of a little tiny consortium that actually pay for an access event, like a TA access. It would mean a smaller amount for each partner, but it could mean that it actually gets funded with small, loose money. Just a thought.
I think it's a good thought, and I think that I don't think there's going to be. I agree with you entirely. We need to have a coherent strategy, and we're nowhere near that at the moment. We're just kind of kicking around ideas. I think that may be one thing, and particularly, we know that potentially works for you. It potentially works for the Austrian Space Forum. There are other people that do that kind of thing. NASA. I mean, I guess these big campaigns that go to Iceland and Greenland. We know that that's possible. I guess the thing that seems to me that is the most significant impact that we have as a community through the TA program is providing access to young researchers to go and do their experiments and build their network and build new avenues of science. And I think it is important not to lose sight of that as well, that we need, we can have kind of like the big things, but we also need to find a way of having at least some level of, the normal, the average, but the quite exciting TAs that we've come to know and love, because, looking at the work that Dan has done in over the years, it does seem to have a really fundamental benefit to the community.
Can I follow up on that actually? So I completely agree. So the early career scientists, I think for them, something like Europlanet is very important. And I think it's also very important, or should be very important for ESA, for example. And well, personally, my first port of call with a business plan would be ESA, because their budget is enormous. And their budget for science is far less than enormous, but I don't understand actually why they're not involved. Well, I understand why they're not involved, but I think they are, I think, the main player that should be involved more in the future of Europlanet.
I think you're absolutely right, and Nigel certainly has that in mind. I think the thing is, again, that we need a coherent thing that we go to them and say, this is the service that we're offering you.
Yeah.
And while we can sort of informally talk to them to kind of get some scope and get some ideas about how to define that, we will have one chance of going to them credibly and making them an offer. And we need to make sure that we've really thought it through before we get there. So, you know, all of these things need to be packaged up. I mean, really, I think what I'm saying is, you know, it's going to be 6 months of talking to people, looking at other models, trying to pull things, you know, trying to make sure that we've got all of the information available to us. 6 months of trying to pull that into something coherent, publishing a draft around this time next year, getting some feedback on it, and then, you know, then we have to make our pitches to people and see whether it works, and it may not. You know, I mean, I don't think there are any guarantees, but again, this is our plan. Plans don't always work out, and we have to make the best that we can of it. And in parallel, there may be other things that come up, like Space IRI, as Anne says. There may be other opportunities that come up. There may be other calls that we can apply for, but I think we have to be really careful about approaching organisations before we're ready to, so that we don't sound stupid and lose whatever credibility we have.
Sorry, can I just step in for the ESA? Because I mean, this is a discussion that we have been having with ESA for years now. The problem with ESA is that they see this as something that the national funding agencies are doing. This is not something ESA is doing. And while it looks like ESA has a gigantic budget, in reality, it's the national funding agencies that have a gigantic budget, which they give then to ESA, but the national funding agencies want to have the control over that. And things like running facilities, I mean, there's a reason why in the end, all the facilities are then national facilities that are run under ESA flags, but that are in a member state. I was also at some point dreaming for various reasons that we could convince ESA to run facilities or support facilities, but they basically say they are happy to put their label on it, they are happy to put a flag in front of it, but funding is a national funding agency thing, and then they basically just want to show this as, yes, this is being paid for by Denmark, and it is now the European ESA wind tunnel, but it still will be paid by Denmark and not by ESA. So this is something I just caution people. It looks like an enticing pot of money, but there is no pot of money, basically.
We had a discussion a couple of days ago here about this issue. So ESA has a list of its own facilities. As Jörn said, they're ESA labeled, but usually supported by national money. This list exists. ESA has a program where they support access to it. So they essentially pay companies to have access to these. But more importantly than that, in contracts with ESA, ESA normally stipulates that they should go to that facility and do a test. And that's how my facility gets money out of ESA indirectly. ESA pays a company to build some part of a rover, and then they say you should go to Aarhus and get it tested. So they come to me and they say, what will that cost? And I give them a value. That's how that works. And this model could work for other facilities. So I have this list of ground-based ESA facilities, and none of them do anything like the facilities that our network has.
No, and those facilities are also not aimed.
We don't.
That early career scientists or anything like it.
We don't compete with them. We complement the whole process in the sense that we could, yeah. But the important thing is that we should go to ESA with our list of facilities and say what this could really help you if you make your company's subcontractors aware that our facilities exist, and help yes, mediate contact such that we can help them. We would be helping in the whole process, because normally, this is something I've said before, and I'm going to say it again. Almost all of the companies that come to me, they know nothing about Mars. I know something about Mars, so I tell them what they should be asking me to do, and that's how that works. And ESA knows that. ESA is very well aware that we are the experts, our community, and that we could be telling these companies how they should be performing tests or whatever they're doing. Yeah.
Gareth?
So coming back to Jörn's point, the one area where I think there's clear overlap between ESA and us is the field sites. And I think that is something that we certainly have to have a very serious discussion with ESA about. How did they do occasionally go off with rovers or taking people into the field and astronaut training, etc. All those and they often set that up from scratch. And by what I hear is that they pay huge amounts of money for those trips, much more than we do. So I think that is certainly an area where we should be very aggressive when we do approach ESA about. I like Wim, and Jörn and everybody for the last 10, 15 years, I'm continually scratching my head saying, why is ESA not involved in more laboratories? And it is the national, international politics. That's the big thing. The question is, when we do approach ESA, can we somehow manage to turn that around and say, look, this is what we have. This is such a valuable asset. You can see what we've produced. Can you turn it round and at the state level encourage the states to maybe either give extra to ESA to support this or encourage the national funding? Because I think politically I can see why it's difficult for ESA to fund my lab in Amsterdam, because clearly that's a benefit to the Dutch system. Other Europeans will see. So I can see why there is a problem, but somehow we have to try and find a way around that.
So the obvious way to approach ESA is to approach the people who pay for ESA, and that is the ministries of our different countries. Yeah. So every country has delegates, government employees that go to ESTEC or wherever, and they decide what the budget is used for, and they tell exactly what ESA should be doing. And these are the people, these are normally people who are also involved in the national space agencies, if you have one. So even though Denmark doesn't have a space agency, we still have contact as researchers in Denmark. We have contact with the ministry. So I can tell them, I can approach my ministry and say, this is what we want ESA to do in order to support Europlanet and support my lab. That could happen. And if we all do it together, each nation, it could be a very powerful way of affecting the way ESA treats us. It would be a game changer completely, I think.
It would. Well, one of the difficulties, I think, for our community is that, at least in the Netherlands, this ministry is a Ministry of Economic Affairs. Yeah. And they're not so much interested in going to Mars, for example.
No, but they're interested in activities that give employment in Holland and money back to Holland and science back to Holland and technology back to Holland. Mm. Probably. If they're not, then they should be.
But this, indeed, this will vary per country, I guess. Yeah.
As Wim said, in the Netherlands, it's very much dominated by the industries that make instrumentation for space missions. And so in terms of testing in your lab, I can see that totally how that would work. The sort of simulations of ice in Atomki, which is fundamental to the science that the mission's going to do. I'm not sure that the economic affairs in the Netherlands is going to care. And how we sell that is going to be really important. And that in terms of the selling the business plan and justifying it, that has to be made very clear that there are spin-offs, and it's okay sending a space instrument somewhere, but if you don't know what science is going to do and you don't understand the conditions there, then you don't really know how to build the instrument in the first place, and you need the fundamental science in at the beginning. So there has been more and more pushing for industry to work more closely with scientists to understand what they really should be building. But in the Netherlands, it hasn't gone great. I mean, it hasn't. They're often the scientists sort of tell, at one stage I was told I had to go and be involved in the Raman LIDS instrument and in the XRF instrument that was supposedly going on ExoMars 1 decade in the near decades. And it was my case of they were just looking for a random scientist almost to fit in and help. And it was not science driven, which it was instrument driven, which is not always the perfect solution. But okay, I'm hopefully they're learning from those mistakes.
I guess I have a couple of comments. One is that in their language, what they really focus on is geo-return. So it means that in some way, the money that they're investing in ESA somehow gets back to their own countries, and it's something that they really have a focus on. And then some of the language that they use is very similar to the EU's and Europlanet, in the sense that they want to support under whatever they're called, underdeveloped countries, underrepresented, yes, whatever, yes. And that could include Denmark, in the sense that in many aspects we have poor geo-return. In some aspects we have okay, but in many ways ESA would like to give more money to Denmark in some aspects. My point is that this is a lobbying activity. So we should be lobbying these people. We should identify who they are, and we should lobby them. That's not what I'm good at, but Europlanet has been good at it.
Isn't ESA supposed to tender for every service that they ask for?
Not necessarily.
Up to? Okay. Oh, just a question.
Often it's way more complicated than that. Often they make a bilateral agreement that it never gets to tender at all.
And they often tell you what's going to happen and then announce it the day before it's closing, and there are right ways they get around it. But you're right, it should be supposedly open, but it's partly politics, because they don't want all the money to go to the UK, for example. So they want to make sure some goes to the Netherlands and Italy and France and Germany. So they also have to make sure that one country doesn't dominate, which is, again, the part of the problems in dealing within the EU is that we try and keep the budgets roughly okay, roughly comparable.
All right, going back to the main theme, maybe a call for more ideas to keep Europlanet sustainable. Are there people who want to share their ideas which haven't been brought up yet?
I will an Erasmus Plus project coordinator, and also a teacher's point of view. There is these years in Europe, there is one main goal. We say there are not enough students interested in science. So one of the main objectives in the European Union is that we need more students interested in science, and we need, and there is a huge portion of money directed in that way. I can see Europlanet as a service provider. from that. So you can, so all right, we need more children interested in STEM. Okay, we need to train teachers. We need schools to come and visit and ignite their enthusiasm about STEM. So there are many Erasmus grants that are the key action one, which schools can benefit from them. So instead of us getting the grant and then giving the money to outreach, they get the grant and pay us to do the job. Personally, I'm involved in many projects. My school in the past started from taking 10,000 euros to now we manage a budget about 100,000 euros per year for setting students in training facilities and teachers. Mm-hmm. So imagine this money from just one school. Okay, so imagine now all the schools in Europe, if you get a tiny portion of it as a service provider, this could mean this could generate a lot of income. So I can help with this proposition. I can make a proposal how I need to know what are the infrastructure, who can do what, and maybe draft a plan of how we can generate income from this situation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Anita?
Yeah, thank you, Achilles. Yeah, I mean, one thing that we haven't actually talked about at all in this sustainability is the networking activities, and you're completely right that we have a whole suite of things that we need to be looking at as to how we can provide those as services. Now, whether that's packaged, you know, into this sort of organizational membership that we've been talking about, you know, there's lots of things here, and Editor and the team that are looking at this group, this area here. There's the education at the schools level. There's education at the early careers level. There's undergraduate training that we've never even touched on within Europlanet, but is potentially something that we could look at doing. And then there's all of those other services, like, for instance, you know, I've seen for years that there's an opportunity to do more with the media center. We can offer that as a service to other conferences and meetings and organizations. It's not going to make, you know, it's not going to make a fortune, but in adding to the pot that brings in something that means that we can, you know, have a secretariat that supports this, and the transnational access, and the ministers, you know, we keep our project management team, and we know how essential it is to have people like Shushmita and Zofia who really understand what it is that they're doing. As we get more self-sustaining and more complicated, gosh knows we are already pretty complicated. You know, if we're looking at not only having EU grants or one type of EU grant, if we're looking at having multiple types of EU grants, and I've been working on an Erasmus Plus, and it's nothing like the Horizon Europe or Horizon 2021. So that's a whole nother kettle of fish of complexity. And then we're talking about, you know, sort of service provision to ESA and labs, and we're talking about maybe doing some crowdfunding, and we're maybe talking about doing some commercial services as well. That's a lot of different things. And Anchorine's looking over there with complete horror as you know, the current director of the new ASBL, and how on earth we manage that. So, you know, I think there's all of these things need to be investigated. You're quite right that this is part of the discussion. And we need to look at how we package that up to make things attractive. And one of the things about sort of coming up with these 10 challenges that we started off the week with is that there's a lot of overlap between all of them. You know, none of them exist independently. We've already touched on early careers and transnational access and how important that is. And, you know, downstairs we've got the industry session going on at the moment. That's a whole another kettle of fish that we've never really explored or exploited. EPSC, we could do a lot more in terms of developing exhibition, developing sponsorship. The magazine, we can get advertising potentially. You know, there's lots of things we can do. We've just got to actually, over the next however long, figure out what are the most important things, what are most likely to actually bring in a decent revenue in the most uncomplicated way possible for us. And nothing's going to be that uncomplicated. And work out also where that plugs into structures that we have. So is it something the ASBL does? Is it something that the ASF does on our behalf, as we've got sort of the model of already? Is it something that the GUG for the Education and Outreach does? You know, there's lots of different, or is it something that we have the model that we've already been working with for years, where it's a consortium of which the ASBL is a minor player, but there to kind of have fly the Europlanet flag and name. I think there is no one solution. That it is always going to be a combination of all of the above. But you know, just even trying to work out how to do this is non-trivial. But thank you.
John, yeah.
I love this idea of training activities. This is really something, so most of us are universities. It would be really hard for a university to say no to something like that. And it would be really hard for them to charge a load of money for it. I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, there are many grants for students also in secondary and upper secondary. There are many grants for students in upper secondary education and also in undergraduate. So Erasmus Plus, they fund the student, and it goes to you. He goes to you because he get. What we do is an intermediary organization. We will help you get the grant that we advertise. We have, as you say, we have a huge. We build a huge network, so it will be easy to spread the word. Okay, now we are doing this thing. So Europlanet will be transformed in an intermediary organization for all these things. So it's a big umbrella. We can help you take the funding. Okay, so instead of you searching the funding, all the students will have the grant, they will give it to you, and you provide the services. There is a huge amount of money coming to this Erasmus Plus project. I don't think, and it has doubled. The amount of grants have been doubled until 2027, and yes, it keeps growing because the decision has been made. There is a lack of scientists, and Europe are pouring money by the bucket loads to fill that gap, because now we are talking about 20% of the potential jobs in our sector that are unfilled because we don't have the people, and this gap will go. It's projected, if they don't do something, to go to 35% until 2030. They want that to turn it the other way, and it is an opportunity for us to take advantage of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And the other thing as well that came up yesterday in our discussions on Central Europe Hub was the doctoral network, and the fact that we need to keep plugging away at that until we're successful. So we go again, and hopefully have better luck next time. Third time lucky, eh?
All right, thank you. Related to the point of education a little bit, I hope Sarah Russell is still online. Sarah, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Yeah, I had a question related a little bit to education. So could you give some insight into how matching funds, for example, work in a large institute like a museum?
Well, I think in some ways we are quite similar in that respect to a university. So we well, hang on, I'll just turn my camera on so you can see me. So in my museum, we are core funded by the government, and we can use our core funding to run our labs. And yeah, proportion of that we can use for things like providing match funding for things. Is that what you needed to know?
Yes, yeah. Well, I was wondering if there are like different ways in which you can do this as well, or is it maybe not necessary at the moment?
I'm not sure that we have other mechanisms to fund things other than through our core funds, which would usually we would expect to be matched.
Mm-hmm.
So is in terms of this new concept of matching funds being required by the EU, I mean, is that something that is on the radar yet in the museum? Is that, or is that?
No, I'm learning a lot this afternoon. So yeah, it's a completely new concept to me, and it's something I'll take back to kind of discuss with our team at the museum to see how we could potentially implement it.
Okay, because I mean, you have some very creative administrators, so if they come up with any ideas, please help us, because I think on the short term, that's probably not going to be an issue for a year, but maybe in even 2 or 3 years' time, it's the only way this is going to keep going.
Yeah. But I just need to go back and discuss with my administrators and our bosses how we can try and facilitate this and make it work.
Thanks.
Okay. Great.
Any other things that you'd like to bring up? No.
Because we're recognizing lots of things we need to do and need to think about and need to write down, and it's how to make a priority list and how to prioritize the different options we come up with. I'm not quite seeing in my mind yet how to do that. I mean, okay, we mentioned crowdsourcing. Yeah, how are we going to assess that? How are we going to evaluate what is and isn't possible? I have no idea how to do that. I'm hoping some people within the team have ideas, but I think what's going to happen, and we'll probably discuss this even more either later this afternoon or tomorrow, is we're going to have to agree to have a couple of small working groups that look at specific little things. And I think if we try and delegate 1 or 2 people to do the whole thing, it's going to crash, because people just can't. We can all commit the odd day full time now and again, but we can't commit weeks and months without causing chaos to our normal research lives. So I think we're probably going to have to nominate some people to help. And if you're willing and able to help, please talk to me, Vim, Anita, whoever. What you're pointing at Sushmita, she can't do everything. Because we need the diversity. So there's no point me and John and Bernard, for example, being a work group, because we're focused totally on the labs, and we need to have the breadth of people who are thinking slightly different ways. I mean, our 3 labs are very different and have different demands, and we'll probably come up with slightly different ideas, but we need more diversity than that. Go ahead, Anita.
I mean, certainly on that, I mean, can we deploy the facility leads and I guess the field site leads as, can we set them each a task? You know, ask them to discuss a few points with their administrator and feedback to us, so that we make sure that across that board of scales of institution, national cultures, funding regimes, whatever, we get a feedback from everybody. I am planning, I mean, I think this entire week I'm relying on the recording, Thomas, not to put any pressure on you, because because there's been so much discussed that certainly I haven't been able to take notes, but I am relying on the fact that we're going to be putting everything through Otter. And then Callum, oh no, he's run away. In his absence, Callum will be writing up notes. No, we will need to do a proper written summary of all of these sessions. So we're relying on the fact that we're going to have good transcripts, that we can pull this together, and that will be part of, you know, the first steps. And Jonas, yeah.
And also as part of the exercise with the challenges, if we can identify some of that for Friday and have maybe a quick summary of where we're at and what we need to do in the future to get it right.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any final comments or questions online? No? Any final contributions from the room here? Anita, you want to?
I just want to say, I mean, it does seem unbelievably daunting. It does seem unbelievably complicated. There are lots and lots of challenges and pitfalls and probably arguments that we're going to need to have. However, I do think it is worth, I mean, you've kind of made this point already, John. We're not starting from scratch. We've been doing this for getting on for 20 years. We have this collection of facilities. We have all these services. It's, you know, we're not starting from scratch. We're working out how to package it up and sell it. We're already selling it. We sell it to the Commission. And if we've sold it to the Space RI thing, then we're doing a good job of selling that. So we're already bringing in millions to support this. We're just looking for other ways of supplementing that. So we have a product, we know it works. We know we can convince people that it is worth doing. It's just telling the right story, breaking it down into a way that is manageable and people can get their heads around. Or you know, not necessarily one thing, having different services that we pitch to different people. But I think we should not be defeatist. I think we should be optimistic. We've managed to get all of these people here. We've got people who, to Jonas's utter surprise, seem to be rising to the challenge and having discussions and actually coming out with suggestions. And I keep getting contacted on Hoover with people saying, how can I help? How can I help? Or not just on Hoover, with people here as well. So, you know, I think we can do it. I think we can do it.
Thanks a lot. I think that's actually a perfect way to end the session. Thanks a lot, everyone. So there'll be a coffee break in a few minutes until 4. We reconvene here. I don't think we'll have another big plenary session, but we can chat to each other and maybe make some mini notes ourselves. Yeah, exactly.
To do notes and list of who we're going to help try and get to do this.
And then I think tomorrow in the follow-up sessions to this, there'll also be representatives from the other related RIs here. So maybe we'll do part of this discussion in a way again, but we'll also talk more about the sustainability of international collaborations and contact with the European Commission, for example. That's more suitable for tomorrow's session when the other RIs are also present.
And bringing in collaborations with groups such as in Korea, which is a huge success and asset, and something we didn't discuss today. But yes, Kiwok was. I don't know if he's still online. Kiwok.
But are they coming? Because I understood that there was I understood that they were coming in person. I know, but
Kiwok, can you actually hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Do you know if any of your colleagues are arriving today or tomorrow?
Probably Thursday and Friday. They will join me Thursday and Friday.
Okay, that's brilliant.
Yep.
Okay, so I wish to apologize for not making enough about your major contribution to Europlanet. But as we were thinking more about how we have to generate money, we didn't think we should expect you to also be having to generate money. You're making a major contribution already. And both Pim and I have been lucky enough to directly or indirectly make use of your facilities in Korea.
Mhm.
I think this is certainly an aspect that when we're selling ourselves to the Commission, to ESA, to the national space agencies, is something that we have to make a big issue about. The broadening internationalization. Pardon? I don't know. And actually, this is actually a clear benefit of the greater internationalization and access to different facilities worldwide, and it's one of the major goals of Europlanet, and will continue to be so. That's something else we must make a big thing about. Kiwok, is your facilities also struggling in terms of the government making major cuts and funding is becoming more difficult for you in Korea? Is that something else you're facing?
It should be coming sometimes, but not right now. But we are preparing it. So, but still, yes, still we can manage it. But yeah, not right now.
Okay, well, we're all jealous. Okay. Do you have anything else you wish to add before we break for coffee here?
No, not yet. But I will update if I have something to.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for being there. I hope we haven't depressed you too much by talking about how we keep things. But
no problem. Yeah.
Who are not aware, in the KBSI, they have I think it's 13 different facilities that they actually offer, which we can make applications to. The one thing, the Europlanet, that hasn't gone really well, Kiwok, is that not enough Koreans have applied to come to Europe. We're all starting to make use of your facilities, but unfortunately, so far, not enough Koreans have applied to the TA facilities. But that's something we will keep helping you with and keep advertising. Okay, I've said more than enough today. Let's go and have some coffee.
And thanks again, everyone. Thank you.